My name is Dorothy, and I'm so glad to be with you here tonight to talk about the sustainability and justice work that we've been doing in Grants Pass over the past few years. And I'm going to open with a quote on the next slide from Mark Andrus, who wrote a book called Brothers in Beloved Community about the friendship between Martin Luther King Jr. and Thich Nhat Hanh. Because the world is so marvelously interconnected, people pursuing different paths of justice, of getting into good trouble, are all contributing to the needed healing of the beloved community. And I love this quote, both because it evokes John Lewis, the good trouble, of course, and because it reminds me that we don't all approach the work of healing our world in the same way. We may be working on climate change or environmental conservation or racial reconciliation, or we may be working with vulnerable children or elders, or a wealth of other things. The social problems that we confront form a tangled ball of yarn, and any loose end that anyone chooses to follow helps to untangle the whole mess. I've lived all over the United States, but for the past 13 years, I've built a life in Grants Pass, Oregon. Next slide, please. Where I do racial reconciliation work alongside sustainability and climate justice work, all with a spirit of love for this beautiful, complicated town that I call home. I come to the work from a place of love, which is a perspective that helps me to make connections with skeptical neighbors and is continually reinforced and supported by good friends who do the work with me. Now, Josephine County, my county, chose Trump over Harris by a margin of nearly 30% in the last presidential election. And this creates a challenge because many of our conservative neighbors simply don't see climate change as a problem. The next slide shows the Yale University 6 Americas survey categories. And you've probably seen this before and are familiar with these categories that range from people who are alarmed with climate change to people who are dismissive of climate change. And I have many doubtful and dismissive neighbors. And I also have cautious and disengaged neighbors. And I even have some alarmed and concerned neighbors too, but we're outnumbered here. On the next slide, I'll also highlight that Grants Pass is a predominantly white, rural, conservative Southern Oregon city. The 2020 census reports 82.1% white and non-Hispanic, which is well above the national average, and 0.5% Black or African American, which is well below the national average. And this creates a challenge in racial justice work because many of our white neighbors simply don't see race as a problem here. As long as we don't actively discriminate, I'm often told, we're good. If there were more Black people here, maybe we'd have something to work on. I hear that a lot. But actually, the fact that we're such a white town says something about who we are, where we've come from, and what our reputation still is among people of color throughout Oregon and throughout the country. And bringing it back to climate, the fact that we have so many climate skeptical neighbors provides a strong motivation for doing climate work in Grants Pass. It offers an invitation to find a way to be welcoming to people beyond the alarmed and concerned. I'm a member of the local Unitarian Universalist Church. There's a picture on the next slide. It's a small lay-led fellowship that's located in a former office building downtown. We have no steeple. We have no minister. We take turns offering services and inviting members of the community to our pulpit. And about 10 years ago, I agreed to present a service on sustainability issues, one outgrowth of which was the formation of Sustainable Road Valley. I have a picture of our webpage on the next slide, which holds monthly meetings where we learn, share, and support each other in our work to build community around the themes of sustainability, resilience, and justice. Many of us have strong ties to other groups, and we bring that energy to our meetings where it mixes and informs and inspires our future actions. We have a few projects of our own, including demonstration firewise garden beds at the local county fairgrounds, a rain garden bioswale at the local community college, and an environmental film and conversation series that has actually been on hiatus for a while, but was really good while it lasted. And on the next slide, we love supporting other groups. KS Wild, Rogue Climate, Williams Community Forest Project, Water League, RCC Earth Club, Pollinator Project Rogue Valley, Southern Oregon Pachamama Alliance, and of course, SOCAN. SOCAN stands for Southern Oregon Climate Action Now. And I think Catherine found me through the SOCAN website. So yay for SOCAN. And we also partner with social justice groups like Grants Pass Remembrance is that yellow sunburst logo there, which does local racial reconciliation work around our history as a sundown town. We work with a group building affordable housing that's both fire resistant and climate friendly. And the NSWA, or Northwest Seasonal Workers Association, which provides free food, medical care, and legal advice for vulnerable workers, and has explicit endorsement of the 17 UN sustainability goals on their website. I am really alert to, aware of, and excited by groups that combine social justice and sustainability, environment, climate type of work. Now, we don't claim credit for the work of all these other groups, but also we don't see it separate from us. We roll up our sleeves, get involved, and contribute where we can. Activist and educator Will Grant, shown on the next slide, describes 4 levels of influence at which people can act on important issues. The individual level, the circle of your family and friends, your local community, and national policy. Now, all 4 levels matter. All of the levels inform each other and nourish each other because they're all part of the same interconnected system. And still, he maintains that we have the greatest influence at that 3rd level, local community. And that's where I'm going to spend most of my time talking about tonight, work at the city and community level. About 4 years ago, I somewhat nervously spoke at a city council meeting for the first time. I knew that they were considering forming a sustainability and energy action task force, and I was there to make a supportive statement from Sustainable Rogue Valley. The task force was formed on a unanimous vote. I applied and was accepted onto the task force, and our group of 12 met from February of 22 to May of 23. We had the help of an AmeriCorps intern whom the city supported, and we wrote this sustainability and energy action plan that's showing on your screen right now for Grants Pass, which was adopted in May of 2023 on a 7-to-1 vote. I'm only showing a small snip from the plan here tonight because our plan for the city is 198 pages long with lots of data and beautiful illustrations. If you go to the Sustainable Rogue Valley website, sustainableroguevalley.org, you can find it under the resources tab. Our mission was to analyze city facilities and operations for potential sustainability concerns, to research solutions, propose goals, and offer recommendations. We focused on buildings, transportation, materials, and natural systems. One of our members is kind of a computer whiz, and he modified a computer program provided by the EPA to translate city utility bills into city carbon emissions, allowing us to project emission reductions and cost savings based on proposed projects. Our recommendations ranged from insulation, always top of the list, to solar fields, to zero emission vehicles, to incentivizing sustainable employee commute decisions, to waste reduction, to enhancement of the urban forest. There's a lot of good stuff in that plan. One of our recommendations was to form a permanent Sustainability and Energy Action Committee to continue monitoring data and reporting to City Council. The committee was approved in May of 23 on a 7-1 vote, although it took over 6 months to appoint committee members, and our first quarterly meeting as a committee rather than a task force, and every 3 months rather than every 1 month, was January of 2024. We met 5 times, analyzed a couple of feasibility studies involving solar fields and EV charging stations, and then we were disbanded in January of this year, so just about 6 months ago. And now we get to the good part. We are no longer a city committee, and so we chatted with each other and decided to regroup as a community team, and we continue our work without city oversight. As of February, the Grants Pass Energy Action Team, and our mission statement is on the next slide, and that's GPEAT for our acronym, which rhymes with 3-peat, which is what we hope to do, right? Task Force, Committee, Community Team, meets monthly to share food, potluck style, and share ideas, sociocracy style, and support the transition to cost-effective, efficient, clean, renewable energy throughout our region through research, data analysis, education, and advocacy. One project that I'm particularly excited about is an exploration of the possibility of community solar project on a former landfill site that's just east of Grants Pass. It makes good sense to build a solar array on a former landfill. It's one of the few productive things that land can be legally used for. And community solar is exciting. Here's how it works. Owners would fund the project by purchasing solar panels in the array and then see the credits on their home or business electric bills for the energy that their panels produce, at least 10% of which would be sold to low-income subscribers at a reduction of at least 40% compared to utility electricity pricing. And I love how community solar checks the boxes for what I would call a climate justice project. We have large-scale, clean, renewable solar energy, check on climate. And we have low-cost, clean energy to low-income neighbors, check on justice. We're fortunate to have Solarize Rogue in our area helping with this project. And we do have a couple of large hurdles to clear before this can move forward. First, the city owns the property and would have to agree to lease it. But they can't use it for anything else, and maybe they will agree. We haven't actually quite gotten to the point of asking them yet. And as we move forward, we keep uncovering new obstacles, but we haven't thrown in the towel yet. And second, we need to raise several $1,000s in initial funding to get the project started. And I'm pretty confident we can do that once we clear the other hurdles and people can see that this could really happen. But these 2 hurdles are what we're immersed in right now, and we'll see how it all unfolds. It is kind of a long shot, and I try to keep in mind that our work is always valuable, whatever the outcome. We're writing a story and forging a path that can be useful for all kinds of future endeavors. It was discouraging to get canceled by the new city council in January, but as it happens, that was precisely the point where things started to get interesting and empowering. We're all local citizens who can meet and discuss and advocate for anything we want. We don't need the city's blessing to do that. And not being constrained by our city-defined mission opens up new windows of possibility. Community solar did not fall under our mission when we were a city committee focused on city operations exclusively, but community solar is something we are absolutely free to work on now. And we meet 12 times a year instead of just 4 times a year, which is a great improvement. And we don't have any restrictions on public meeting notices for how we're allowed to talk to each other. So there are some benefits. Now, the 2023 Sustainability and Energy Action Plan is not a priority for the new City Council, but the plan does exist. It is rich in data and projections, and it is still being used by some good folks involved in city operations. So even though we got canceled, we already have a legacy, which is a net gain. We took 3 whole steps forward and only 2 steps back. And we continue the work with the connections and collaborations and friendships that formed around that plan and which are lifelong. Now, I and a few others on the team enrolled in the 8th cohort of the Rewiring America Electric Coach training, which is taking place this month. It's an 8-hour training, 4 2-hour classes with lots of optional office hours and extra Zoom conversations in between. What we're hoping to gain is a common language and context for talking to neighbors about electrification generally. And I'm hoping that we'll have a booth at the local growers market on September 20th for Bill McKibben's Sunday, which I've seen some information about in the chat, and which is coming up in just a couple of months. We're thinking about the growers market because why reinvent the wheel? We can plug into something that's already going on and put our energy into figuring out a creative, interactive way of engaging our neighbors. Our group is also working on gathering case studies from neighbors who have done electrification projects on their homes or businesses and are willing to share their stories. We keep our eyes open for grants that might fund the completion of the solar array on the police station, which actually started, hooray for Grants Pass, before our task force even formed, along with the addition of battery storage, which isn't there yet, for emergency resilience. Emergency preparedness is such a good topic for building bridges with the cautious and disengaged, and perhaps even somewhat with the doubtful and dismissive. And we're working on building our common language and context for emergency preparedness as well. Now, my work around sustainability and climate justice is very much connected to my work with Grants Pass Remembrance. It is, and you'll see, and this has to do with racial reconciliation, which you can put up the next slide and get a little bit of a preview of what I'm going to talk about here. It's like peanut butter and jelly, or as I like to say, cumin and coriander. We just go better together, the racial reconciliation work and the climate justice work. Grants Pass Remembrance is a truth and reconciliation group around our local history as a sundown town. So we can consider this 1924 editorial in the Oregon Spokesman, "Let's Keep Grants Pass a White Man's Town," side by side with this 1995 article about our county coming together to say no to the Aryan nations who wanted to make Josephine County a center of organizing for their racist efforts. And this side by side kind of illustrates one of our core principles in Grants Pass Remembrance, which is that the broken and the beautiful so often go together. If we refuse to see the broken parts of our troubled history, like that 1924 editorial, we're actually closing our eyes to some of the beautiful parts of people helping each other and linking arms to emerge from that troubling history, like this beautiful rally. I wasn't here yet in 1995, but I wish I'd been there for that. Now, Grants Pass Remembrance formed in 2021. We follow Brian Stevenson's 3 R's of reconciliation, being remembrance, repair, and redemption. You can't get to repair and redemption until after you've done the hard work of remembrance. And part of the beauty of this approach, remembrance first, is that it's so accessible. Anyone can work on uncovering and remembering their towns or their churches or their personal racial history. Uncover it, remember it, sit with it patiently in conversation with neighbors, listen to their responses, especially the challenging ones. Think and converse some more with the same folks or with others and see where it leads you. Another core principle is that it's never too late to write a new ending to your story. And the next slide shows a picture of the Ku Klux Klan marching in our annual Boatnik Parade. It wasn't really called Boatnik then, but I'm just going to refer to it as the Boatnik Parade because that's how people know it now, back in 1928. And there is oral history of those white hoods in the Boatnik Parade up through the early 60s, which is shameful. And 95 years later in 2023, here we are marching for the first time as Grants Pass Remembrance in that same parade, remembering the broken while working toward something more beautiful. Taylor Stewart, who is with the Oregon Remembrance Project and who we get a lot of help and support from for Grants Pass Remembrance, is fond of saying that we can't change our history, but we can always change our relationship with our history. And that's a good thing to keep in mind. And this slide actually reminds me to mention that as we advocate for justice in our community, we're mindful to minimize waste at our events. So we have made a point of using tissue paper flowers instead of balloons for decorations, for example. And we give away wildflower seeds to the crowd rather than candy or disposable plastic toys. So we put love for the earth right there alongside love for our neighbors, climate and justice interwoven. The next slide shows some photos of some of our other events. We held our third annual Martin Luther King celebration this year, which featured an educational program, which you can see in the upper left. There's a picture of that. It was on the stage, as well as an extremely well-attended community fair with food and dancing and lots of conversation. We had progressive groups tabling at that community fair. We had conservative groups tabling at that community fair. City police and fire had tables at that community fair. I was so proud of Grants Pass because people will surprise you in a good way when you open yourself to that possibility. We also held our third annual Juneteenth celebration this year. The picture in the upper right is actually from our first one a couple of years ago, but it was even much bigger this year. We had neighbors of all ages, ethnicities, and religious faiths showing up to share food and games, including a rousing game of Juneteenth bingo, focusing on Black history trivia questions, under a large picnic shelter at a local park. And the bottom of the slide shows a close-up of the banner we carried in the Boatnik Parade, which is a beautiful work of art by local artist Dan Kennedy, and it inspires me every time I see it. So Martin Luther King celebration, the Boatnik Parade, and Juneteenth are our big 3 annual events. And in between times, we also gather oral history. We give community presentations like to Rotary and Kiwanis. We invite speakers, we create podcasts, we do tabling, and really anything else that comes up. We kind of grab any opportunity we can to talk about this stuff. And we do this work in a spirit of wide embrace. In Grants Pass Remembrance, we means all of us. It means holding a seat at the table for everyone, whether they're ready to join us or not. Maintaining intention to be interfaith, interpolitical, intergenerational, and to extend radical welcome to all members of our community. There's an Abraham Lincoln quote that I like a lot that says, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better." And this really captures the spirit of Grants Pass Remembrance for me. It has helped me to calm down that internal sense of urgency that tells me I can't waste time on people who disagree with me. I've got to win this fight. And maybe I do win, but afterwards I've still got enemies who are going to work hard to undo as many of my accomplishments as possible. There's got to be a better way. Loretta Ross talks about the 3 Ps of alliance building. We have our proven allies. That's the first P. Those who always show up for us, agree with us about most things, and rarely, if ever, make us feel uncomfortable. We have our problematic allies. That's the second P. Those who show up for us on certain issues, but disagree with us as often as not, and usually make us feel uncomfortable, although we're really glad for their support in our areas of overlap. And we have our potential allies, the third P, which is pretty much everyone else. My work with Grants Past Remembrance has really helped me to widen my circle of people that I'm willing to see as a potential ally. And that has had a tremendous effect on how I show up for climate work. As I participate in the dance of stepping forward and backward, hoping to make net progress over time, it really helps me to remember that things change slowly and in unplanned ways. Even people who aren't joining me yet are watching me, and I need to stick to my principles and not get lured into dismissing my neighbors, using polarizing language, or taking unethical little shortcuts for the cause. We take courage from each other's examples. We take note of what's possible by seeing what each other do. How we treat each other matters, even those who offend us, and really especially those who offend us. A friend of mine once said that working with Grants Past Remembrance has softened some of her hard activist edges, which can sound kind of risky, like, oh no, I don't want to go soft. But staying hard ignores Robin Wall Kimmerer's insight that all flourishing is mutual. Hard edges don't really promote mutual flourishing. Maybe I do better work with softer edges. That's something I've been pondering in different ways for several years now. And I'll close with the last slide with 2 final quotes. The first is from Charles Eisenstein, who is a complicated person. He would be one of my problematic allies if I knew him in person. But he says a lot of great things. He said this at the Global Earth Repair Conference in 2019. A society that is locking people up and is marginalizing and diminishing and dehumanizing people is also going to treat nature in the same way, to make it into a thing and to treat it as something less than sacred. By doing any work that restores sacredness to any being, we are all doing the same work. The ecological crisis that we call climate change, the cause of it is everything. And I love this quote because it reminds me yet again that there are so many paths to climate justice. And the second quote is from climate organizer Rachel Mislivy, who's associated with the National Unitarian Universalist Association. And she says, I do not want to build the world that is right for me. I want to collaboratively cultivate a world where all communities thrive. And I love this quote because it reminds me not to get overly attached to any particular outcome or roadmap. We have goals, certainly, but we don't have a fixed agenda. We aim to get as many different neighbors as possible into the conversation about climate, about racial reconciliation, about justice. The process itself is a worthy outcome. And that's it for me for tonight. I thank you for your attention and I welcome further conversation.